What's going on, guys? Matt here with an interesting video for you today. I'm sitting in my 2015 Chrysler 200C all-wheel drive, and this is going to be a video I've been kind of thinking about for a while now that some other YouTubers have done with their cars, and that is 5 things that I hate, and hate is kind of a strong word in here, about my Chrysler 200. So, without further ado, I'm going to give you my take based on a year of ownership with this car and 29,000 miles worth of driving it. Yes, I have driven that much in a year. 5 things I hate about the car. Okay, so the first thing that I'm really not a big fan of is the electronic gear selector, the rotary selector, at least in this car. So the way these work, you've seen these in cars like, I know that some of the new Jaguars have these. Some of the other Chrysler products, such as the 300, has this. But however, some of the other Chrysler products, like the Dodge Charger, the Challenger equipped with the automatic, those cars have an electronic T-bar gear selector, so it looks and feels, pull it back and forth. It looks and feels like a mechanical gear selector, but it is electronic. I kind of wish they had something similar to that in this car, because I'm not a big fan of these. The reason being is it really lags when you're putting it into gear. Like, for instance, how this works is you put your foot on the brake. I have the car off right now, and you would twist it to the desired gear. So if you go to put it in reverse or even neutral or drive, whatever, it takes a second to go into gear, and you can feel it kind of pulse into gear. So you got to keep your foot on the brake a little bit longer than normal before you actually release the brake and start driving. Otherwise, the car might, violently jolt or something like that, because the transmission's not in gear yet. Now, the nice thing about this is it frees up all of that, it's impossible to see, but underneath this floating center console, it frees up all that storage space, which is really nice. But I'm just not personally a big fan of the rotary gear selector. I'd rather have like a lever or something to put the car into gear. But that's my opinion. The next thing I don't like about this car, which is sort of related to the rotary gear selector, is this guy right here, the electronic parking brake. Now, I'm kind of hating on a lot of the electronic stuff, but I'm a big fan of analog stuff, so that's kind of why. So basically, to use this, right now the parking brake is off, but to set the parking brake, pull up on that, and it illuminates like that. Now, actually, if you listen closely, you can hear it electronically actuating the brake if you have the windows down or the door open. And to deactivate it, you put your foot on the brake, actually, and then you push down on that like that, and it goes off, and now your parking brake's off. Not really a fan of that. I prefer like a hand brake or even a foot brake to save some room in this car would be more desirable, but technology and electronics is the way everything's going today, but that's just my opinion. Not a big fan of that, really. The other thing I really don't like about this car, which will be number 3, is this right here, the design of the turn signal indicator and the brake lights. Now, I really like the tail lamps on this car. I think they look really cool with the smooth LED accenting, but those are always lit as you see them. The blinking right there, I have the 4-way flashers on, acts as your turn signal and the brake light, actually. I thought that was kind of an old design, and interesting that they didn't make it LED lights in there. It's just a regular bulb, kind of old school looking. And it's a little bit of a letdown in my opinion. I would have preferred a separate turn signal indicator, maybe down here near the reverse hint lamps, which this car doesn't have. So if you put your turn signal on and you're applying the brakes at the same time, obviously one will illuminate steady and one will blink, just like the old days. So personally, not a huge fan of that. I do love, like I said, the look of the tail lamps. They look very nice and elegant, but personally not a fan of that. I think it was sort of like a cost-saving thing on Chrysler's part. So the fourth thing I'm really not a big fan of as far as the interior goes in this car is this big black plastic piece around the infotainment and Uconnect touchscreen system. It just kind of looks and feels sort of cheap and out of place, and it's sort of a similar design around the of the door handles here, but here it's a little more acceptable. It's a little more tasteful with the satin chrome accenting, which you do have around the centerpiece, but they have the same thing actually in the Chrysler 300 as well. So, and I remember back in 2011 when they redesigned the 300, I swear I saw one that had nice like piano veneer or wood trim around it. It'd be nice if they could make this sort sort of like a trim piece like this rather than this just flat black plastic trim, which looks kind of cheap in my opinion, and is a little bit of a letdown because the rest of the interior of these cars is so nice. It's all soft touch and leather. Everything looks and feels expensive and like they really did their homework, and the interior in this thing is so well thought out. It's just this one centerpiece here that kind of looks and feels a little bit cheap. That's my opinion. I just think they could make it look a little nicer with some wood trim or black piano veneer just to give it a little more pizzazz and make it, you know, look even more expensive. So maybe Chrysler can use this as a tip. The other thing I'm personally not a huge fan of in this car is the 9-speed automatic transmission itself. So that may surprise you. It's phenomenal for fuel economy, but comparing it to the 8-speed automatic, I just think the 8-speed is a much better transmission. It's much more well dialed in. And I'm going to show you why I don't like it. It's the second to third shift, so let's see if I can get it to demonstrate here. All right, that time it wasn't as prevalent, but what it usually does is on the second to third shift, it kind of holds second gear for a second and then it abruptly shifts into third gear. I don't really like that, and sometimes it's a little hesitant to downshift when it's in drive, like I have it right now. In sport mode, it's much better. The shifts are harder and sportier, you know, faster, and it's immediate to downshift whenever you demand more throttle. But I don't really like the second to third shift in this car, and I've driven the 8-speed. It just feels like a much smoother and more refined transmission than this one is. And I know these have had a couple of issues where the 8-speed has been like drama-free, so I kind of wish they would have just put the 8-speed in this car because I just feel like that's a better transmission. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I really had to nitpick in order to make this video. This was not easy. I really do like this car. It's a great daily driver. For a V6 that gets nearly 300 makes nearly 300 horsepower, you know, 295 to be exact, and 262 pound-feet of torque. You know, it's got good power. It moves very nicely. Great highway car. I average over 30 miles per gallon, even with all-wheel drive, consistently with this thing. It's fantastic, and I really like it. It's a comfortable car to drive. It's easy to drive, easy to live with, and you know, I put a lot of miles on it in just over a year, so really enjoyed this car, and I really nitpicked. I would say my biggest complaint with it is I feel like the 9-speed automatic could be a little bit more dialed in than it is, and a little bit better, and you know, especially since the 8-speed set the bar so high. But other than that, I mean, this car is fantastic. Chrysler, you guys really stepped up your game with this car, especially compared to the old 200. And I liked that car. It was nice, way better than the Sebring, but this thing is just worlds better. The old one can't hold a candle to this one. So really enjoy this car. I am proud to drive it as my daily driver, and yeah, keep on making these great cars. So thanks again for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.